right.
We are live, kids, here on the Droopy Sack Entertainment Network, and we couldn't be happier. Jolly. It's a great night because the king himself has decided to come by and just talk about some of the things that have been happening in our little WR world. And no big introduction is needed. If you don't know who Adrian is, you're not paying attention to the game at all. And I'm here to inform you then you need to know this man. Adrian, welcome. It's good to see you back. How are you?
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, welcome, big dog.
Surviving.
Yeah. And please don't mind one thing. If you are an Adrian fan, you will know that one thing he likes is somewhat privacy. And we respect that with Adrian. So he's going to use his moniker this evening. And my face for radio, you should tolerate. But to make up for all of it, we have the beautiful D-Sack in the background to make up for all of that. But if you're on with us in the chat, I'll get on there so we can see that soon. We'd love and are happy to have you. Adrian, you have had an exciting few weeks, and we want to just get right to it. You were invited to Pixonic's headquarters in Russia, of all places, and we would love it if you could walk us through the trip and take us with you and tell us about what you experienced.
Okay, so I think I'm going to start right from the beginning and try to remember like how the trip went, because there was some bad parts to it too.
All right, well that's okay. I mean,
but that's kind of what happened. But anyways, so when Pixonic approached me, this was kind of when things were really, really bad in the game. And then I kind of heard, some of the leadership in Pixonic had kind of changed over. So I figured now would be a really good time to make my move, because I had built like this bridge with Pixonic. And, there were a lot of changes that I felt needed to be made. And there were a lot of points that the players, they had made their point, but I felt that it needed to be echoed through me, because I had that relationship with them and they trusted me. So I decided to make my trip to Moscow. And that was a bit of a exciting experience for me because I've never really traveled alone. And on top of that, like a couple of years back, I had a really bad ear infection and it affected my balance and stuff. So I didn't do well on planes. So I flew over to Moscow, and then I met up with a couple of the community managers and pretty much the whole Pixonic team.
How long was your flight?
Oh gosh, it was about 6 or 7 hours from Toronto to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And then I had to stay there a couple of hours because I had to rest. Because of my balance.
Stop off in Amsterdam. I have to stop in Amsterdam.
Yeah, you have to stay, especially if you have a stomach ache.
Well, and there's plenty of entertainment. I'm gonna ask if you stayed and got any entertainment. It's all up to you. Not suggesting that you saw any entertainment in no way whatsoever. Tell me, it's first class ticket, obviously, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. No,
so what was it like? Stepping off into Russia,
it was
the plane.
It took about 7 hours to Amsterdam, and then another 3 hours from there to Moscow. And I remember I landed there, and you're kind of nervous because you hear things about Russia, and you're not sure. And I mean, coming from North America and the whole thing between the States and
Well, so anyways, now that's a good point. That's a good point, Adrian. Not to interrupt you, but we that are a little older grew up with Russia being the enemy. I mean, we grew up fearing that they were going to fry us in our sleeps with nuclear weapons at the drop of a hat at some point. So if you have any of that whatsoever in your background, that's enough to it's enough to burn into your brain so that in the future, like yourself, you're going to be thinking about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's the first thing. I was really nervous going to Russia.
Yeah.
But I knew, I have invested in my channel. I have invested in my channel, and I knew this was very important. I mean, not only for my channel, but for the game and for the players. And I needed to represent the players. So, you know, I did. I arrived in Russia, and when I was going through customs, the guy's like, "Do you like vodka?" And I was like, "I don't drink," because everyone thinks that. But it's funny how they just joked. And yeah, anyways, from there I kind of caught the taxi, and I went to the hotel where I was staying at, and then I met up with some of the community managers. Anna wasn't there at the time. Some of you may know Anna. She arrived a couple of days later. But yeah, I met up with some of them there. And then the first day that I was there was more just to kind of rest up. And they showed me around like the Red Square and stuff, and some of the other sites, how to use like the subway.
Some of the tourist sites and stuff like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I was walking around there. It's kind of weird because I was like, this is kind of a lot like Toronto. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was a lot like Toronto. So yeah, I was a bit surprised by that. It's quite clean actually, and I felt very safe. And you wouldn't think that because I don't know.
You don't know what to think, and and, you know, it's just because it's a different world, and your mind runs wild. And unless you're going to a war-ravaged country or somewhere that's really on edge, most of the other places are like where we are. I mean, you know, you can get a Big Mac and a Coke everywhere. You know, I mean, there's something about that says a lot.
Well, here's the thing. When I was applying for my visa, I was going through like the Canadian, like the forms, and there were kind of warnings. There were warnings like, avoid this area. You got to make sure that you get these vaccinations. You got to be careful of these things. And I'm like, man, this sounds like a real rough area. I don't know if I want to go. So anyways, but yeah, like that kind of put me off a little bit. But anyways, I did arrive there, and they showed me around. And yeah, I was pretty safe. Like even my family was contacting me when I was there, like, how are things? I think they were really nervous because they also were like me, not knowing what to expect.
How are your internet speeds? You got good data plan in Russia?
Well, they actually gave me like a SIM card and stuff, so I didn't have to. So it was pretty good. Okay,
so you are there. You've rested up. Take me to Pixonic.
Yeah, then that's the other thing. Well, then you know, they introduced me to when I went to the office. They introduced me to pretty much the different teams that they had within the company. You know, like every company has, well, I guess in this case they have developer team, they have you know, support and so on and so forth. So they have different teams, and I met up with them. I kind of introduced myself, and then I spoke to some of the lead developers as well. Once I was there, they kind of put me in like a boardroom, and then they introduced me to some of the lead developers, like the game designers, people responsible for like the economy, the matchmaking, game modes, and I guess you know, all these different teams that they had and stuff. So I had a brief kind of meeting with them, and they told me about some of their plans, some of their thoughts on certain things, and I wanted to know what my thoughts were. And this was all leading up to like the presentation.
Okay.
And
so you had, it's good to hear that from the beginning, your first meeting, you had an exchange of ideas.
Yeah, we were. They were very open to, you know, what I had to say, and they just wanted to hear like my thoughts and my feelings towards things that they were thinking about doing to the game.
Well, and it says something because you've expressed yourself quite well, not just through your channel, but in your chat with the YouTube representation, where there is a communication that's quite regular, but it takes on a whole other meaning when it's in person. Just the way this podcast kind of takes a whole other meaning on once we go to video. There's another layer to it, a personable tangibleness that is difficult to achieve when you're not in person. So did you feel as if, oh, go ahead, buddy.
I was going to ask, like, what was what was your preconceived ideas about the types of people who were the developers and that were in the leadership roles there, based on just having communication via email or Discord?
I don't know really if I had any preconceived like notions about how they would be. Like I knew, I guess maybe I thought that they'd be like very uptight about things. Like, I mean, they want to talk to me, but at the same time, you know, I am sort of like a stranger to them because I mean, it's one thing to chat to someone, then it's another thing to, like you say, talk to them in person.
So were they feeling you out the kind of same way you were feeling them out with this introduction meeting? Were you guys getting kind of to know what grounds you were on?
Yeah. I think, well, I could tell that they weren't sure. They were a little bit, I wouldn't say uneasy. Just, you know, when you meet someone, you feel a little bit uncomfortable because you just don't know them until you get to know them.
That's why you break bread with vodka, man. That's why you break bread with vodka.
That's what the vodka is
and I could tell because, you know, it's when we're talking about certain things, they're like, is it okay that we talk about this thing? And then they'll be like, yeah, he signed an NDA. So,
yeah. And that's something, that's something let's talk about, is that please understand that some of their future projects that they were nice enough to discuss with him, he did sign a non-disclosure agreement. So it's normal. They just don't want to give away any trade secrets. There's plenty for us to talk about. He's not hiding anything. There's no conspiracy here. It's just a basic agreement that is quite normal, and they just don't want to give away something that will hurt the company. And so there are, you know, we should be able to talk about quite a bit, but there are certain things that are just obviously we're not going to touch because Adrian wouldn't even know about it anyway. And if they shared something with him that he's privy to for the future, then he was able then to give opinions on it while he was there and maybe even change things for the better for us for the future. So we're going to leave certain things alone, but don't worry. There's plenty for us to talk about. Conspiracy theorists, go. You know,
so what time of day did you guys meet up? Was it first thing in the morning, or was it in the midday?
Well, it's funny, when I got there, I think it was around about, it was at night. It was actually around midnight.
What?
It was 11:12. So I arrived there midnight, and I got to the hotel. It was around midnight and 1 a.m. I think, and then I met 4 or 5 of them, I think, in the lobby at the hotel.
They were gonna squad jump you, man.
And they were funny because you know what's funny is because I had them on my WhatsApp and they were messaging me, and I think because I didn't message in straight away, they kind of got a little bit worried whether I had arrived. So they're texting me, and I'm like, oh,
that's right.
But, yeah, I did when I arrived, and then we just spoke, and then I think the following day it was pretty much they showed me around for that day, and then it was, I think the Wednesday was when I did my presentation, and that's when I arrived, and then we introduced, and then they had that like boardroom talk before my presentation. But what was very interesting when I did arrive at the office was that, so in North America, you can usually tell who the CEO's office is, right? You know, it's very
generally,
yeah, like you can just tell when you walk into like a building, you know who the CEO is. Just
there are status symbols usually give away.
When I arrived at Pixonic, they're like, "Would you like to meet Philip, the CEO?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." They kind of led me through the office, and I was expecting to actually be led to like his like a personal office, but it wasn't that. He was actually sitting at a desk just like with the others, and he was working there, and I was like, oh, that kind of really took me by surprise. But at the same time, I'm like, this guy he's very different. There's something different about him. And then obviously I spoke to the lead developers, and while I was talking to them, just about, I would say about between 10 and 20 minutes before my presentation, he walked into the boardroom, and he had like a private talk with me with there was another developer who I was chatting to at the time, and he said he wants to hear about the game. He said not to hold back and to be honest. He said he just wants to know like what's going on, and he said if it's bad, he wants to hear. So I think that was very comforting to hear.
May I ask what you told him in summary? Not like, point by point, but if there, what did you convey to him at that point?
No, I told him that I will be very honest with him. Like, these are the things, like I said, I had made a presentation, and these are the things, you know, that I'm going to talk about. And, you know, there are some bad things, unfortunately, and I was going to tell him, because the presentation that I did was in a very open, like, presentation area. He was there along with the other lead developers of the game.
Okay.
So they were all listening in on my presentation. And then I did my presentation to them, and they were very interested in, you know, what I had to say. But I think what was really cool was even after my presentation, they came up to me and they started asking me, like, they had a lot of, during the presentation at the end, they had a lot of questions that they were asking me, you know, things related to the game in terms of, I guess, like the robots that they were developing, like what are my thoughts on certain things. And I was kind of taken aback by that, because I didn't think they would be asking me that many questions. But what was really cool was afterwards, many of them came up to me and they were asking me even more questions. So they wanted my thoughts on that. So I think that was something that I didn't quite expect, because it could tell that they were very passionate about the game, because otherwise they wouldn't have spent that time asking me the question. And the thing which also kind of took me by surprise is, once I was done the presentation, I think, I left their office. It was run about after 7. I think it was 7:30 at night, and most of them are still working. And I asked the one guy, I said, you know, what time do you guys go home? I mean, you would think, like, if they're working from like 9 to 7:30, those are really long hours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like, when do you go home? And he's like, well, when they feel like going home. And I'm like, well, okay.
So they're kind of on, they have a hold of their own leash as far as motivating them to get things done. They're really self-motivated to begin with. They're all probably very invested. So it was all kind of some of the best of what you could hope for, as far as walking into this office and seeing dedicated, hardworking people that care about the game. So
they were very, very passionate. And I could tell, like, you know, when you talk to someone and they talk to you about something that they're very passionate about, you can just tell through their language, through, you know, the enthusiasm when they talk to you about something. I could tell that through everything, like all the people that I met there. So they were very, very passionate about what they did, and they were very hardworking. I mean, if you ask me, like, the last job that I worked at, when it came to like 5:36 p.m., I would head home. I mean, these guys were there like 7:30, and they were still there working. That's why I asked him, like, when do they go home? And he's like, well, you know, they didn't really have a time. And the fact that they were still there kind of showed me quite a lot.
They don't have a time. They have deadlines.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they work extremely hard. So
yeah, I got a question real quick, Shane.
Go ahead, buddy.
Like when they asked you, or when they basically told you to ask questions and to ask without reserve, did you immediately start to think of certain players that you have spoken to maybe 6 months up to that date, that their questions were not really, they were such great questions that needed to be asked, but it was like that surreal moment where you had the opportunity to ask those people that could give you the right answer? Did you have like a flush of all of those questions and those players? You know what I'm saying?
No,
Or
I
was he?
think I came very prepared. Like prior to that trip, there were a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. Whether it be like tankers, matchmaking, high prices.
Mm-hmm.
I had a list, and I made sure that I stuck to it because I didn't want to get sidetracked. By being sidetracked, I don't put enough focus on the things that I want to be changed in the game. And it's not just I want to be changed. It was sort of like a sentiment or a collection of comments coming from players. There's certain things that I wanted to make sure that the focus was on that, because if I got sidetracked, I didn't want them to think of that when I wanted them to think of something else that I had on my list, because I had a priority list. So I made sure that I stuck to it.
Are you?
When you go ahead, Drew,
No, I
up.
was just gonna ask you. Do you remember those specific questions? Or are you able to share those questions? And was at any time any of those questions that you were, kind of receiving the physical cues, the body language of the people?
Yeah. Put us in the room if you can at all, as far as like what Droopy said, body language. You obviously picked up on quite a bit. When I ask you that, what kind of comes to mind for you?
Well, I would just talk about one question that they
That's fine.
asked me.
Sure. We love that.
They asked me about. So I think at the time they were working on the Falcon because we were testing it on the test server.
Okay.
They had. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was a Falcon at the time. So, they made reference to the Ancelot. And I started talking about the Ancelot, and I said, what the Ancelot had, like what it was in the game, was kind of a really dark moment in the game's history, like since I've been playing. I mean, you have this robot that I say waddles across the battlefield. It has an energy shield and it has a physical shield, and it really made the game stale because clans were running like 5 per player in order to win. And I mean, we couldn't use tridents because that thing would block everything. So it essentially became a battle of Ancelot versus Ancelot, who could press the fire button first.
Yeah.
So that was a really stale kind of gameplay. And then I told him how I didn't really like, that kind of gameplay. And then we started talking about the Falcon. And then I said, well, and now you have this Falcon where it kind of absorbs the damage, and you have that robot that you can't kill. So there's certain things that, I mean, they were interested in some of the questions that that they presented to me, and then I kind of gave them my feedback on it. But I was honest with them, and I did say like certain things that I did not like. I mean, I started talking about things like tankers, matchmaking, high prices. I mean, I won't get into detail on how detailed on those things.
We will get into some of these things later. We will be talking, and just I mean, it's not that there are things we can't talk about as far as that. It's just certain specifics probably don't need to be done, but we get the gist, we get the idea. That's perfect. That's what we want to know. But we can get into the new economy a little bit later, as far as prices and so forth, and into the specifics of what you told them were on the minds of a lot of our listeners, are the things that we don't like, and we'd love to know what you were able to tell them. But before we get into that, I'd like to keep going as far as like day 2, and so you had a successful first day. On your second day, then what did you experience then on your second encounter when you went back?
Well, my second encounter, they actually had like a tournament thing going on. It was, I believe, on the Friday. They had a tournament going on within their company.
Okay.
And they had a couple of other YouTubers. I believe they were just Russian YouTubers that they had invited over. And, I got to speak to some of them as well. And we basically watched the tournament. They asked me if I wanted to kind of watch their tournament that they had within the company. So I said, yeah, sure. It wasn't Friday afternoon. And yeah, that's pretty, I mean, I watched them play. And it was good to see the employees playing the game. I mean, you could tell that some of them were experienced pilots. I mean, they're not champion league because obviously they're working at the company, and the company's not going to let them play like 24/7 or anything, because you have to play a lot to be in champion to maintain that rank. But I believe they are like mostly expert, I think, and masters, quite a few of them. So it was exciting to see them play.
Okay. And did you notice anything about that? Because I mean, there's a whole robot called a Russian death button, all after the idea that the Russian players kind of pioneered the use of it. And I know this was way back in the old days of the game, but it's all described by just being named after them as how important their contribution can be at times. Yeah, tell me about that.
When I saw them play, they weren't like the players that you would see like in Champion League. So like if you look, and I'm sure the same goes with Android, but I know on iOS, you look at the guy's hangers, like, whoa, 5 Spectres, or 4 Spectres and a Balkazari. Like, it's like no surprise. When I watched them play, they had really mixed up setups. Not bad setups, it's just that they had more variety.
Did they have a Droopy setup, like a Spectre with a Storm, a Hydra, a Tehran, and an Orkan?
I mean, yeah, they had...
How can you say a Droopy setup when it changes every 3 games?
Well, I mean, that's emblematic of the way that I roll, man. Now, seriously, I would have walked
Chaos.
in. I would have walked in with that look. Hey, I got to tell you something real quick. Them Russians, they are crazy, like in a good way. They are ballers, and they take this game serious. You ever listen? You ever go to YouTube gaming?
It's so monotone. It's so monotone.
YouTube gaming,
when they describe it all,
and when you hear their voice, you can't even understand like what they're saying, because it's like a whole different. Did you really go there, dude? Really? Hold on. Let me drop it again. No, but I was like, man, what the heck are these guys saying? Because they sound like they're declaring war on the world. So I got my phone out, and I was like, man, I gotta do this. So I went to App Store and got Google Translate, and I downloaded the app, and I went Russian to English, and then I hit microphone, and I put that microphone right next to the speaker, and as they were speaking, they were saying things like, fluffy girl shoots like a worm, or something like that. I was like, word? Seriously, you got a fluffy girl shooting worms? Dude, these guys are gangsters, and they're talking about fluffy stuff.
Yeah, that is gangster right there. When no emotion whatsoever.
Could you imagine being that girl, that meme, and then like you're living on in infamy, and you're looking back at 24 years old, and you're like, really? You're gonna bring that meme out?
Something, Adrian, that I would like to know, when you saw them break into their groups, that they were dedicating, small groups to certain problems. How big was each one of those groups? I'd like to know how many people they were dedicating to each little problem, because I'd imagine they're doing this. Now, this is speculation, but when we talk about things like lag or bugs and so forth, that they make little groups for this. Am I tracking here? Is that kind of what we're seeing? And about how many people were they putting together for these groups to take on these problems?
Okay, well, I guess
just in your experience, I know this is just what you saw.
They would, okay, so the customer support, like that area, I felt was a bit lacking. That actually took me back by a little bit surprised. I'm not going to get into the numbers, but I was actually feeling a bit sorry for them, because I know a lot of players complain, and they might have like problems in the game and stuff. And then when I saw the team, I was like, whoa, okay. It's like you think that it's going to be this big team, and then you see it, and it's like a quarter of the size.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was one thing that kind of shocked me. They had a pretty big team for like the technical side. It was all kind of split up, and I mean, they just did a general thing, like this is the area where they work on like the technical side. This is the side which works on like the test server. This one, this area works on, and I mean it.
Well, okay,
varied.
people from each area, and then they made
it
a
would
team.
vary. Yeah, it would vary from. I mean, anywhere from. If I had to say numbers, I mean, I didn't count or anything, but I mean, I would say maybe anywhere from like 10 to 20, depending on which area.
Okay, see, that's more than I was picturing. I was picturing just groups of 5 or 6 people. That's more people committed to it than maybe I thought. Because now I want you kids think about that when they're tackling these problems, and you're probably saying to yourself, "Good, damn straight, Evil, get 20 people on those bug fixes." I mean, it only took 20 people a year to 2 years to fix the Zeus bug. Why not? So I say to you, yeah, one thing you got to be careful of, though, is when you have that many people on a project, coordination is key, and their project leader has to be able to handle those people well. So hopefully that's how it goes down there, is that when they tackle a problem with that many people, that they have good leadership so that they can get things done at a nice, steady pace, and not just bantering the problem about from one person to another, because that can happen when you have too many people on a project. But it's very encouraging to hear that there's that type of commitment to it. I
think also a lot of players think like, like they introduce like new robots, new weapons, new maps, and all the players are like, but this is not what we asked for. We asked you to fix like the technical bugs and stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, they do have people that do that. It's just, I would imagine the coding that they have to go through when they see something, and then they have to go through all the coding. Sometimes maybe it does require 10, 20 people to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, I've worked with a developer before at my last job, and I knew that, I could see from the coding and stuff that he would go through. There was a problem on a website. Sometimes it would take him weeks to find the problem, because he didn't really know what he was looking for. He kind of had an idea, but then when he started going through all the pages and pages of coding, he had to go through, each line.
Sure, and test it out.
Yeah, and test it out to see if that was the issue. And the thing is, it was such an interconnected, site with all the different facilities across like Canada and the US. If it happened on one site, it's probably happening on the other sites, and then he had to make sure that it worked.
Well, you always have to remember, kids, several platforms, okay? We're not just talking about one game here. In theory, yes. But when you're talking about the logistics and you're talking about problem solving and coding, we're talking about Android, iOS, PC, and what am I missing? Amazon, and so forth and so on. And if I missed anything, but each one of those has code that's different. Otherwise, we'd all be playing against each other, which is my dream, is that we finally get to all play on the same platform.
Oh, you're talking about Android too?
Yes, especially Android. I think that if you can combine the player pools of Android and iOS especially, you solve your player pool issues that I believe are sneaking around in the shadows of the background. I'm not totally convinced the player pool is as healthy as it should be, but that's a different subject altogether. Something we can talk about also. But for now, let's get back into Russia and take me through the rest of your time there and what stands out to you, because what you've outlined here is a lot of dedication and a lot of people who care about their workplace and care about their product, obviously.
And then you have the tournament.
Yep.
Like what happened after the tournament?
Yes.
After the tournament, then I went out to dinner with some of them. And that's kind of where I wasn't feeling that great. Because I don't know if you remember that I got sick. Yeah, this was after, right at the end, like dinner time. Well, I wasn't feeling like I had like a food poisoning or anything. I just felt like I was coming down with something. And I don't know if it was just because of stress on my body, me not being used to obviously that environment, the weather, and just the stress of traveling, especially by myself. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't feeling that great. I kind of had dinner, went back to the hotel, and the next morning, or actually late that night, I could tell that, you know, I was getting hit by the flu or something. And I'm like thinking, oh man, this is not good. Because Saturday I was supposed to kind of do some sightseeing, or I wanted to do sightseeing and buying some like souvenirs and stuff to take home, because I would leave on Sunday. And I got hit really bad on Saturday. I was in bed the whole day. I was in the hotel, in bed the whole day on the Saturday. Didn't have breakfast, didn't have lunch. I woke up kind of like late in the afternoon. It was like 6 or 7 or something. Kind of had something to eat, and then I just had to rest up because I was going to leave on. Well, I was going to leave. I had to leave the hotel at, if I remember correctly, it was like 3 a.m. That was when I had to leave. So I had to make sure that I was well rested because, you know, I'm heading back and I'm not feeling exactly the greatest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So that was that was my.
Well, I'm sure that was no fun at all. I mean, you're feeling that terrible, that far away from home. You've already accomplished quite a lot. You're just thinking about getting home at that point. There's something I want to touch on. Stephen C., yes, they do care about money. And yes, they do care about product. The individual people who work at Pixonic, the individual people who do not get a profit from Pixonic, the people who are there working on it, they care about the product. If you were to ask any goofball coder that works for them, they care about what they're putting out. The disconnect, I believe, that you're referring to is that the leadership, in your opinion, tends to care more about monetization. I'm not disagreeing with you, my friend, but the individuals who work there that Adrian encountered and saw spending 12 and 15-hour days on, those people care. That's what I feel that needs to be clarified. Thank you. Because it's just that those people, but you know, there is a point where you start to think things are expensive, and Adrian has agreed with you on that. He has said in this program that he felt things were expensive, and he expressed it to them during that visit. What they're intending to do with that information, holy cow, we'll see. You know, it seems as if they flew him out there and they listened. You got to give them credit for it. Now, whether they listen to Adrian and don't take his advice, that's up to them. Or if they listened, and even if they were placating him and the public, I just don't see them going out of their way to do all that. I believe their intentions were good. Let's just shorten it to good. But what they do with it from here on out is totally up to them. But you do have a point about how it feels to the player, sir. Adrian, so you were able to do your best to feel good enough to get yourself home. And
I think what was kind of interesting was
please
prior to my trip, the person that I was dealing with, he was asking me if they should like record it, like if I want to record it or maybe do a vlog about it. But the way that I saw it back then was like, because I know a lot of you guys out there that are listening in on this podcast, you know, Adrian only does like what Pixonic does, is his Pixonic's pet, or, you know, we're going to go through all that other stuff. But the thing that I was thinking through my mind when they asked me that, I was like, okay, well, are they kind of using me to, you know, market like the things that they're going to change? And I decided not to kind of get into the details of the trip after I came back, because my thinking was, I rather them change things. Like, you know, they say they're going to do these things, but saying you're going to do something versus actually doing it are two different things. So that's why I didn't kind of go into, you know, saying like doing videos or like basically vlogging it, saying, you know, this is what they're going to work on, because they can say that they're working on it, but if I don't see any results, then you're making me look bad. So that's why
catch-22.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's why I decided So that's why I decided against that. So, you know, as the weeks started to pass, I started to look to see at what changes were being made to the game. Like I started looking at things like, you know, was anything happening to the tankers? Was anything happening to like matchmaking? Like, what about the prices? You know, the balance, the robots, the giveaways that they were doing on Facebook. I mean, they started doing that more regularly. I told them to actually keep that up because, you know, every little bit helps the players. We take a look at the prices right now. The content, it's not $300. I mean, $100 is still a lot in my opinion, but it's a lot better than the 300. We look at the robots and the weapon balance. You know, prior to me going, obviously the Dashbots and the Spectre were out. Those were too overpowered. But I started to see a general trend. I mean, you look at like the Hover, the Raven, you know, the Pursuer, the Hellburner. They're not overpowered if you make a comparison to like the Dash or the Spectre. Even the weapons, Obelisk, Ballista, they're not as powerful as what they were doing before. And I had a very serious talk about, you know, what they were doing to, you know, the weapons and the whole point of releasing something that was so overpowered and then nerfing it down. I said, I don't agree with your thinking on that. I think it makes more sense to rather release it weaker and then buff it, because that way you're adding value instead of taking it away. And I said, people are they're gonna see it very differently. And you know, the thing is, when you start kind of, if you want to earn back trust from your customers or from, you know, anyone, you've got to, if you're gonna say you're gonna do something, you got to do it. And I think that's the bottom line. If you don't do it, then they're just going to distrust you even more.
Well, that's we've talked on the podcast in the past that there are things they've dangled in front of us. They never said they were going to do, so we can't say that they promised us. But you know, things like the reload button for a Punisher or other weapons like that, you know, or being able to use our components for other stuff, you know, so everybody started saving their componentry. That never really panned out. So players remember these things. DSAC, what was it you wanted to tell us?
I was just thinking about with what you were saying about a customer. We are customers. We're consuming a product, and whether we're paying for it and we're not paying for it, we're still consuming a product, and it's an experience. And we can pay money to engage a little bit more into that experience and to expand on what our abilities are and to be able to compete at different levels and stuff. And I completely understand the frustration when you buy something at a specific power, whatever the ability is, like of a weapon or of a robot, as is, and then 2 months later or a month later, it gets nerfed. And then now that weapon is no longer effective with that current meta or whatever it is at the time. Like when I was thinking back to the aphids, when I got 4 aphids, and those aphids were like, you know, you shoot straight up and then drop straight down on the head. Now you'd be lucky if you get the eyebrow of somebody. It just brushes past them and you're like, ah, man, there's a whole dang salvo just brushing by him. Didn't even do anything with 100% accuracy when I first got it. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating. It really is frustrating. But the ever search for balance, because of all these different platforms and all these different players with different leagues and different hanger strengths and stuff, it's like I can think that would be a freaking nightmare for someone like me with ADD. Boy, I'd be tripping. I'd be freaking out. I'd be like, man, fire me,
Josh,
fire me.
But before we leave Russia altogether, is there anything else you'd like to add about your trip? Because it sounds like it was very, I'm going to say cut and dry. That's a little cliche, but you know,
I think it was very productive.
Okay, it sounds like it was.
I sent my message across to them, and you know, some points I stressed even more than others, and I would show them proof of certain things in case they didn't understand it, just so that they could kind of hopefully see it from my perspective.
You felt as though after when you left them you felt as if you were fully understood or mostly understood.
Yeah, I think so. I think they understood me because, I mean, we had some pretty long discussions, even though, I mean, it was for a few hours or so, but I mean, it was very detailed. Like some of the things that you guys might mention, you know, like they would say, I know players will say, but you know, we've been saying this all along. Pixonic doesn't hear us. Trust me, they hear you, because some of the things that they were even telling me, I wasn't even aware of. Some of the I've seen maybe a couple of comments maybe mentioned here and there, but I didn't really know the details. And then Pixonic would actually fill me in and say, yeah, the players are doing this and this and this. So, I mean, by them telling me and informing me on certain areas, I could tell that they are listening. It's just that they have to cater to like the masses. There's just so many players, and the ones that tend to say things are usually a small percentage. Like I said, you know, you have the masses which are quiet, and then you have the ones which are very loud, but they're a small percentage.
Yeah, so statistically, most people don't even comment. They just move on.
Well, statistically in this game, if that is true, then there are a lot of players expressing themselves, so there must be a lot more that are staying quiet. You wonder. You don't want to give them the moniker the silent majority, because that would imply that they are the ruling class if you were to give them a voice. I think that most players share the same concerns when it comes to the game. And as we've discussed these things, Adrian, kids just kind of know. I won't get into it because the list is too long, but most of the main concerns we are all talking about, Adrian relayed those concerns quite nicely to Pixonic, thoroughly. And as he just stated to all of you, he felt as if he was heard and understood, and that he was just listened to, not to make the players happy and himself, so that he can go and report on that. What they're going to do with it, like I said earlier, is up to them. Just because Adrian said something doesn't mean that that's going to be law from now on. And he doesn't know their plans for the next couple of years. And most companies do have long-term plans set out. And now that you have a third party such as Unreal Engine involved with the overall production, hopefully in a good way, their technology, the copyrights they own to help the game run more efficiently and into the next realm technologically, integrating the same things you're seeing on, let's say, Fortnite, PUBG, you know, big time games with millions and millions of players.
Did they discuss that at all, Adrian?
About
the Unreal Engine?
No. I mean, the only things that I mean, I don't want to get into details, but they did say they're working on like Workshop 2.0. They showed me some maps. I'm trying to think of like some changes that we see already in the game to the black market with the tokens. They asked me for my opinion on that.
And what did you tell them?
Well, at the time, because that was using, I mean, they had changed currencies for that so many times. I think it was like gold and then tokens.
It's a good point, Adrian. We have to
keys.
Everybody that this game changed a lot, even since he's come back. I mean, gold was gold for a long time. Then we got an update about 6-7 weeks ago, and gold became almost an also ran. You wondered what you were going to use it for besides upgrades if you wanted to, because they implemented the token system. Then comes this next update, and all of a sudden now gold under the new economy is highly sought after, because it is the key to making time not beat you down. The gold will allow you to do so much in this game now. Whether or not that is a good thing, well, that's a debate that we could definitely have, but it's going to be several hours, so maybe perhaps that's a whole show. But under the new economy, you stressed your concerns about it, but you also have aspects of the new economy that you fully understand and support. Could you tell us a little bit about your ideas on the new economy?
Ideas as in,
well, a little bit of what you like and what you like. The new economy
with the latest update, I'll tell you the things that I don't like about it. So
please.
The whole attack and the defense boosters, I don't like that part because that makes the game pay to win. I've been very clear about this, in my live streams and stuff. And I think if you're going to be using those kinds of boosters, then you've got to be able to either remove it completely, or you got to balance it in some way. So if you're going to be using, say, an attack booster, which gives you more damage, then I think your robot should suffer in, other areas. So maybe your robot is slower by like 5% or whatever it is. Maybe the weapons pop off quicker. But this would be in an effort to balance something like that. So I don't agree with all these boosters, well, the attack and the defense. But I do agree with the resource boosters because I think that is very important in the current economy, especially when it comes to getting new content and stuff like that, or boosting your silver, for example.
Well, they don't pile on the beat down. The resource boosters don't pile on the beat down when you're talking about MK2 max players. It's less of an issue when you're talking about the middle ears and middle of the road robots. All in all, boosters, wouldn't you agree, Adrian, that if the matchmaker were to be a little bit more friendly, I mean, if it worked a little bit better, we wouldn't have as big an issue with boosters because there wouldn't be such a disparity, and then boosters to pile it on? Wouldn't that help a little bit? But now the matchmaker is limited also by numbers in general. And if the player pool, depending on what time of day you're playing, could be very small, whether or not there are millions of players on a basis, depending on what time of day is, there just might not be a very many players playing. So I believe boosters would be less of a big deal if the matchmaker weren't so harsh sometimes.
Well, here's my thinking when it comes to matchmaking. This is like boosters aside. When you have players that can tank down to any league that they want, you essentially do not even have a matchmaking. You do not even have a league system, because you've got a serious problem. You've got players who can drop down to any league that they want, and then basically beat up on the players, bullying basically,
which is what we see on occasion.
So you can't really talk about matchmaking in terms of being matched up, because that right there is your problem. You've got to get rid of those tankers. You've got to remove them from the game, because once you remove them from the game, then things will settle down. It might take a couple of weeks, and I know players will probably say, but they should start tweaking it straight away. But you can't do that, because you've got to let the water settle first, and then you got to see how how players are being matched up, because maybe that right there would even solve the problem. You don't know that. It might take a couple of weeks, might even take a couple of months before you start seeing like clear signs that the matchmaking is, or maybe it's not working. But I think once you get to that point where you've eliminated the tankers, that problem right there, then I would go in and I would start making tweaks to the matchmaking.
Well, now
what's going on.
What I've seen lately, Adrian, that is getting around the tanking moniker, because obviously there will be numerical representations of what it means to be a tanker for the program, for Ella to be able to locate and take those people out of cyberspace. And to me, the tankers have adapted, and now I'm using the term sandbagging. They're sandbag tankers, which is they just only maybe do 75 to 100,000 damage, and then sandbag the rest of the game and just walk around or just stand there. That's what I experience as far as tanking. That makes things more difficult, but you still should be able to pinpoint inactivity at that level within the program. It's just going to be more difficult, but tankers have adapted is what I feel like. And I think Pixonic has taken steps, but it seems as though they've dragged their feet a little bit in this area. That's just what it feels like.
But what
it
about
feels
the
like
players,
they've dragged their feet?
But what about the players that get, like, let's say they're Diamond League players and their best friend is in Champion League and their best friend is like, you know, a baller in Champion, and that person pulls up that Diamond League up to Champion League. Like, how fair is that? You know what I'm saying? Remember when we were talking about this before, why we couldn't squad with Iron, because Iron was all MK2. We're talking about the Crusaders, and they were a tough clan to fight and fight with, but we didn't have the hanger strength to accommodate or to match and complement their aggression or their defense, because we
as many people experience, when you squad, you have to be careful who you're squadding with, unless you don't care and you can make up for it later. But most times when I would squad with people with such superior weapons and I get pulled into higher level play, I would have to then make up for it later. And it's unfortunate that you receive any kind of penalization for playing that way. It's a byproduct of the system. No one set up the system for it to be like this. It just kind of is a byproduct of it, that when you squad and if you have a vast array of weaponry levels, it's going to be difficult to place them. Can we achieve a hybrid matchmaker? Is that possible? Is that doable, or is it just a pipe dream that we like to say? Because it seems as if a hybrid of the two matchmakers that we have experienced in our time in the game, if you've been here long enough, would solve our issues. I know that's easier said than done, but is that even implementable, or is it just something that sounds good?
I think eventually they will resort to something like that. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of, you know, what I discussed with them and what they told me, but they do have solid plans, and they have considered a lot of things. Like they did go through some of the things that they had considered, and they do have solid plans for that, along with game modes and stuff like that.
Okay, so then can we just say that subject matter?
It was something that
it was a subject.
They have been discussed. It was being discussed a lot.
That's the first we've heard of that, and it's encouraging, regardless of what their decisions end up being. Like, Steven, if you're still with us, buddy, you know, it's encouraging to hear. We'll see what they end up deciding to do and which direction they take us, and we can then be praise or, you know, beat them up for it later. But we also should keep in mind that to reserve and then give out praise when it is necessary and is needed. The whole trip, to me, is an example of that. That there are a lot of great positive aspects to it. Let's hope that there is a finished result that shines of your involvement while you were gone, so that your time there was more than just a vacation with a nasty ending. You know, with the
angry ending, not a happy ending.
Now, you know, in Russia, did this enter your mind? You know, the Russians, I hear that they like to spray radioactive stuff on your food, and then that's an assassination thing. Just be careful, buddy, because you could be a state enemy.
And then they make the weapon called the flux.
Okay, so our new economy. Obviously, you said there are things that you like, dislike, but people are up in arms about the obvious two biggies: upgrade time and upgrade money.
And please, this is crazy.
We're talking about things that are the two items that you need to try to acquire the most now are, I suppose you want to get gold if you can try to upgrade, rush some stuff, but things are so expensive that you almost need to not rush your upgrades so that you can take that time to earn the silver. I do like how the rule or these boundaries encourage players to play. They want you to earn your way to the top this way. It just seems like the hill that they've given you to climb is a lot steeper than any hill we've encountered yet. How do you feel about these changes?
When they first came out with those changes, I could tell that it was affecting, other players, especially those like even in my clan. For me, I wouldn't say it didn't really affect me because it kind of did. I mean, I've been through a lot of silver. I've made most of it back now, but I think looking back, I think they went too far with the upgrade times and the costs, the silver. And that was my original, what I had come to. That was my conclusion.
I really like that. I really like that, Adrian. It's a nice, simple, very accurate way, kids. Can't you agree with this? Adrian put it very well. They wanted to improve things, but they just went too far.
But then the thing is, with Pixonic, like sometimes they introduce something and it looks terrible. Like, I mean, look at the black market. Look how when that came out, that was just terrible. I mean, there was the way that they introduced like the dashboards, and then they came out with like offers, and then they came out with, like the Royale game. So, what we may be seeing now is just part of the puzzle. We don't know like what plans that they have to help players. They always seem to analyze things and look to see how players are struggling, how they're climbing the rankings and stuff. But I did have, and I mentioned this to you guys, I had a talk with someone in our clan who, I think he's a moderator on Reddit or something, and maybe he's in the chat, but he was explaining to me, and he was saying that, the changes like the boosters being in the chest, he said, you know what, this is actually not as bad as players think it is. Because he had run through some numbers, and he was saying you could actually make quite a significant amount of like silver and gold through the boosters that are being offered, in the chess, as well as I guess now in the Royale game too. I haven't seen how that has. I mean, we just got the update recently, so I haven't seen how it has affected me. But if they're offering boosters like silver or like even honor, it is helping you in order to get, more silver. Or in the case of honor, the honor rewards, you're getting more silver and more tokens. So if you're getting more tokens, you can use that on the Royale game. And as you know, with the Royale games, quite a few of them, you can actually pick up quite a bit of gold from that too. So when you think about it, if you're making more silver and more gold through that, you can use that to upgrade quicker. All of a sudden, the longer wait times and the amount of the amount of silver that's required, I wouldn't say it doesn't become an issue, but it's not as bad as it was before, because I believe he actually mentioned to me, he said if his calculations are right, you could actually speed up levels, I think he said 11 and 12.
11 and 12.
So, and he spoke to Josh. Josh, you were on.
Yeah, when he said, what about the? So I'm in Master League now. I'm no longer in champion. So I'm getting 30 per. And how many is that? Evil, like we were talking about that yesterday. How many tokens? Like
keys or tokens?
Keys. Yeah.
Keys, yeah.
And so what I did was whatever it was, like what, 300 or something like that, or 360 or 320. And I would get all the bronze chests, and I would open up my first one with the ad. And then it says, do you want to open up one more, or do you want to open up 36 of them? If whatever it was, you know what I'm saying? And then I would get a lot of silver, but I got a lot of booster, resource boosters, gold booster, speed booster, whatever it was. And then I used a couple of the resource boosters, and I started getting a lot more silver. And it was a lot more convenient than me having to go back into my hangar and go back to all my light weapons that I won in those bronze chests and sell them for like 10,000 silver. I'm just going to leave them alone. I wish that there was an option to just be able to push the button and say, delete everything under level 10. Boom. All in one shot instead of having to do them individually. But that has helped with the silver. But it's
it's still it helps.
But you have to dedicate the playing time.
You got to play. You got to play.
Yeah.
What really, I get that part. You got to play. I totally agree with Adrian. Just they went too far. And these upgrade times, 62, 63 days for one weapon for just level 12 MK1. One weapon, 2 months. That's outrageous. And then I'm not going to ask Adrian. He's already said his idea on this. For me to ask him again would be trying to push him to answer more flamboyantly. He's already given an X answer, a nice answer. My answer will then be, I feel as if it's way too far. I don't think it's ruining things. I believe that they just need to reel it in a little bit. I think they will, as a matter of fact. My opinion is that they will end up fixing this, and it will not be as bad as this for long, but I believe we're going to have to suffer through a little pain. I might be wrong. If I am, okay, but I believe it would be best if they fix this.
Well, who do you think is actually suffering? The people that are at the very
middle
top,
class.
The middle class are at the very top that have had max weapons and MK2 because they were able to take advantage of rushing their gold upgrades and in the pre-new economy, the old economy. And then you have people that are stuck at like level 10, 11, 12 MK1 with maybe 40 million silver and 123 gold. You know what I'm saying? Or the people that are at the very middle that have a miscellaneous that are all in the Diamond League, the Expert League, and the Master League. Who was it trying to help? And who was it trying to hurt? Now that's a real question that I've been asked many, many times. And
I don't know if it was trying to hurt anyone. That's usually the hurt part is a byproduct.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Not
to
a
slow
non-planned
down,
one.
To slow down the grouping together of too many players in one league, not moving on to the next league, to spread them out so that there's more players to go against. As soon as you hit battle.
Like what Looney was saying, that he pointed out so nicely a couple weeks ago, that this could end up keeping players in leagues for a longer time when they're upgrading these weapons.
What do you think, Adrian?
And logistically, I believe that's totally it. Go ahead, Drew.
No, I was just going to say, I was asking Adrian what he thought about that.
Yeah, please, Adrian, you want to weigh in on that?
Well, here's the thing. Like, I know you said that you think they're gonna reel things in, and they may do that. But what they will most likely do too is they will have to adjust other things in other areas of the economy. And I think that's the part that catches a lot of players by surprise, and maybe that's why there's so much backlash, because they don't understand how things are being balanced. So let's just say, for example, they did reel back on some of the upgrade times and the costs. The chances are we're probably going to see, I don't know if they're going to do this, but we may see things change in like the black market chests. We may not see boosters. You know what I mean? Like they're taking, because if players can use boosters now to make silver, and then on top of that, you are reducing the times. You're giving too much back.
There's way too many decisions.
You understand where I'm going with this? Like if
the rock paper scissors thing is that every and the podcast that we did a few weeks back, it was outlining. I can't remember the name of the theory, the PYGAS, PYGAS theory, but it's basically when you have all these rock, paper, scissors balances going on that you have to keep in check. When you make something stronger, you have to make sure that the ripples throughout the game don't throw everything else off. And it's the idea behind the theory is that you inject more chaos into a chaotic situation with the intention of controlling other parts of the chaos. So, you know, if you're talking about our solar system and you throw one planet gets out of whack a little bit, it's going to throw all the rest of the gravity off. You have to compensate. And Adrian,
realign,
yes, that's exactly what's going on here. You have to keep these.
I mean, you know what? A very good example too. If you take a look at supply drops, you know how we all had like robot components and stuff, and everyone was so happy. Then they took it away, and boy, everyone was like pissed off.
Sure.
But if you take a look at the changes that they've made now, looking back at that, I'm wondering how many players out there feel that the current way that they have now is better than what they had before. Because if you look at the amount of keys that we are getting, I mean, we're not getting as much from the supply drops, but we're getting quite a bit from, you know, like other areas of the game, you know, like the battle rewards, for example, going through that. So the other areas that have actually sped that up, and with the boosters that you get, which also helps the honor, you know, the honor boosters, and then there's also key boosters and stuff like that. We're actually getting, well, according to, I think, Robbie, he mentioned that we're actually getting even more keys now than what we had before. And the thing is, if you're getting tokens, you actually have the ability to get items that you want instead of being given that is something that Pixonic decides for you.
Droopy?
Yeah, I was wondering something, Adrian. Okay. Decision paralysis. Like you're over analyzing a series of different possible choices that you can make, and because there's so many choices, you get overwhelmed and you don't make any choices. So you're stuck there. And then you latch onto the most logical thing to blame. And when you have, let's say I would say probably what was it? The American bots, where it was just gold and silver. Why is there so many currencies and different ways of obtaining those things? It's like when I go in, I'm having to go into the Royale thing for the gambling portion. I'm having to go into my silver. I have to go to my workshop points, my tokens, and my keys. And all of them have different, you know what I'm saying? Like different,
they all play a different role. It's kind of like looking at like the world economy. You have euros, you have US dollars, you have gold currency, you have silver, you have, you know what I mean? It's like, I think that's kind of where you're getting at.
So like, what do you recommend for, go ahead.
They've created a complex system. I mean, looking back at this now, I think the biggest, well, where the problem stemmed from was maybe when they introduced workshop points, or I shouldn't just say workshop points, the workshop feature, because I mean, when you look back now, it has created quite a lot of problems. And I think they tried to, I wouldn't say try to backtrack, because maybe they had other plans for the game that they, you know, they wanted to use workshop to kind of achieve something that like beyond what they had thought they could do. And then when they got into it, then they realized that maybe there may be problems with it. And then they're trying to reinvent or take that system that they have and then improve on it. But then in order to do that, they would have to have a whole different like currency.
Well, so it's very complicated, isn't it? Because
yeah,
started the game they didn't have this game planned out 4 years in advance for all of this. It came about naturally. It reminds me of a hospital, because I've spent many a day in hospitals in my time, and my hand is huge. Yes, it's big because it's way up there. That's in the comments. Somebody commented. That's funny. That's Willow. That's funny. So I spent many a day in a hospital, and hospitals, whenever they get a grant or donated a large amount of money or go out of their way, they add a wing, or they have a new radiology center, or they have a new ER. And if you go into a hospital, it's never this perfectly laid out, real easy place to get around in. It's usually a maze. And the currency system reminds me of that a little bit, that it seems to be something that they kind of, out of necessity, had to kind of put together. And
it's like building
without all this forethought. Yeah, without all this forethought, like a city planner does, without enough forethought, you end up with discombobulation on a. My hands need a nerf. That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Let me tell you about my hands and their buffing ability. Let me tell you. Okay, so sorry, Droop.
I would drop the mic, but there's no way of dropping this thing because I have it taped.
But what gets me is that a lot of our listeners, especially our several hundred that are quite regular, are aware of a whole podcast we did that outlined a paper and a speech that was put out, that a speech by someone from Pixonic that was outlining what is pertinent to this point is they were outlining that when you need to and you want to have the game and the players sway to your desire and direction, you just create a new currency. If you feel as if you are having issues, creating a new currency will give players a new way to invest their money, and players don't like that. And a lot of our listeners know about that. Pixonic, in their game plan, is to create a new currency, of which they just did again. And I don't know that it was necessary. Were these tokens necessary?
I mean, I'm telling you, it's soon going to be a barter system.
And not just that, the tokens. I mean, it's nice without the tokens that you get in your supply drops, like when you achieve a certain level and you get these supply drops, man. That's the only real way that you can save up these tokens. Now, if you want to buy keys for the black market, you are able to spend $1 and get a key, and you can then dip your toe into it. But if you want to play in the token pool, cover charge is 10 bones to get in and play. And that's I feel like that's steep. I feel like it makes the token currency angry and harsh. You know, it doesn't seem like it wants to play nicely with me. How do you feel about that, Adrian?
I have a question for you guys. So with this new economy, what part do you find is helping you the most? Is it supply drops? Is it battle rewards? Is it the offers? You know, is it
beyond that, not just the new, okay, under you're talking about a lot of these items they've implemented.
Shane, you just cut out.
Last several months.
What do you find is the most helpful for you?
Helpful. Probably the ability to buy componentry with workshop.
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked is because for me, I have found, especially over the last 2 weeks, you know, I burned through I think, over 500 million silver on my MK2 Flux. And I think it was more just I was kind of curious to see how much I would spend under the new economy. And I've been through a lot. And I thought, man, how long is it going to take me to make that all back? I started using boosters, and I was looking at how, like, the honor rewards, like the battle rewards, was actually helping me out. At the time when I did get my Flux, I burned through, I think it was about just under 1 million tokens. Within that time, I managed to make, like, within a 2-week span, less than 2 weeks, I think. I mean, mind you, I do play quite a bit, but I managed to make back pretty much all of those tokens.
Well, we also have to take into account that with your whether it's your YouTube hanger or your personal hanger, you have serious stuff, and your level of play is so high that the average amount, regardless of your boosters, your average amount of reward, no matter what currency it is in the game, is quite a bit higher than most players. So yes, you did have to play a long time, but you also have to, if you're going to relate this to the average player, they're going to have to play all that and some, and if they don't have the boosters, even more. And that's a hill that looks very formidable to a player who's in Expert League and has no lime green in their hanger whatsoever.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why I asked you, because you mentioned, workshop, the offers, for example. Now, the thing with the offers is that is to get items, right? Because you're using the offers to get component items. For me, the reason why I say that I find the battle rewards more helpful for me, and I think this may even apply to all players. If you're making tokens from there, right, you can use that for the Royale game. Over time, you can use it for the Royale game, but you're also getting keys, and you're also getting components for, other things, like some of the newer content, as well as where you're getting tokens and you're getting silver. So all of those things kind of build up. Like when you put that through the economy, like you use the tokens for, the black market, you might win like a griffin or whatever. You can always sell that. You might win an Orkin, which you can use to upgrade, put it on one of your robots that you have. I just find that there's more flexibility in that particular part of the economy that they've built. And maybe if they were to improve the economy in the future, maybe they need to look at that.
Excellent.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Because there's different parts to, like, it affects so many areas. Like if you're going to be getting, let's just say you had quite a bit of keys, and you got keys from that, and you put it through the system, and then you actually get like gold for, like, you put it through, you get gold from, let's just say you're opening a bronze chest, right? So you all have gold for that, and then you would use gold for the offers. So I think if they did adjust anything, like if I had to look at the current system that they have, I think the things that they should adjust, if anything, would be through the battle rewards. That's if I had a choice.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. But I also, one of the things that Cheryl said was the increased waiting times. What is it? The long times to upgrade gives more time to get more silver. And that has helped me kind of tamed my impatience to upgrade. Like I want to get it upgraded now, because I'm seeing that there's a correlation between my doing not so good in the matches and my levels. So if I have something that I'm going to upgrade right now, I want to get it expedited fast. But if I don't have the gold to speed it up, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to ride this out for a couple of days and just grind and grind and grind and grind. And then I've made up the silver that I just spent upgrading it, essentially. You know what I'm saying?
Now, when but when you get, the numbers are so huge. I mean, when you get a new thing and it's super cool and you want to play it, and you're a player that plays with, high level stuff, and you think to yourself, well, unless I use gold, I can't use this for 40 days, 50 days, because it's just not fair to my teammates. And even if you get stuff, you really want to play with it, but to think to yourself, well, I really can't play with this for the next 6 weeks. I think
it's kind of like the position I was in when the Spectre came out. Because I know many think that I bought my Spectre, but I was saving up my gold and my workshop points to use it on the offers, and it took me about a month before I actually got it. But at that point, quite a few in our clan already had like 2 or 3 Spectres. I was running around in Inquisitors, and we're facing squads out there. You had like 3 to 4. And I'm like, man, like these guys have Spectres, and I'm in like an Inquisitor. Am I going to get like smoked? But you know what? I just bared with it, and eventually I did get my Spectre, and I did level that up. But even now, like I'm in a position where like I have a Falcon, or I have like a Pursuer, all these other. I got a Wayland too. I'm not going to be upgrading that because it's going to cost me too much. It's going to cost me too much in terms of gold and the silver to rush it.
Unless you have just something you can't wait and you're just super excited about. There are 2 things here. Older players that have been around, they obviously are going to concentrate on upgrading their old stuff as much as they can before they even consider going down the road with new stuff. It's difficult to start to think about upgrading those items to 9, 10, 11, and 12 when you're talking about these huge times. Old guys, they're just going to upgrade their old stuff more often than not. But new players, you run the risk of alienating some of them just because they get into the game. They may not know that it was much faster and don't have that perspective, but I don't think it's necessary. I think that it is so vital for the game to have an influx of players coming and going, coming through, upgrading their stuff, newer players coming in. But if you have a whole generation of players that start at Warbobots 3.0, which is kind of what we're calling this, if they start from there and they've got nothing but the new economy in their windshield in front of them, they're not going to feel invited, welcome, appreciated.
Especially if they get into the Facebook community.
So I hope that these numbers and so forth don't carry through and alienate a whole bunch of new players, because we need them in the game. There to be this influx. The player pool, a healthy player pool, ideally will make the matchmaker work more correctly. But now I know the matchmaker, not everybody's favorite thing, and I am probably leading the charge, if you will let me, to say I am upset with the matchmaker. Droopy?
No, I was somebody. Okay, so this is the most. And Adrian, we talked about this before offline. Pay to win. When I hear people talk about pay to win, the immediate thing, because I'm looking at it from both sides. I'm looking at it from the players that do pay a lot of money, which a lot of people call the whales. I guess that's the actual term, the whales. They pay a lot of money, and then they get all this premium stuff, and it's all like they themselves are OP. Like they're walking around in their real lives just wearing a t-shirt. OP, look at me, with little fingers like up in their face. You know what I'm saying? With little foam fingers. But that does not mean that that player is going to win. And I know a lot of players that have maxed out everything. I mean, there's no way I can compete against them in the Battle Rec account with all MK2 stuff, because they're that good. I can't compete against them with my stuff. But then I know players that have the same gear, but I beat them every single time with a Death Button Raven at level 11 MK1. So it doesn't really necessarily mean that the money that you pay is going to correlate to wins. You know what I'm saying? Like, Adrian, you actually put it better than I could have ever put it just now. But like, what are your thoughts on that conundrum? I guess that's the word for it. The conundrum.
I've seen a lot of players out there who have serious decked out hangers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, surprisingly, well, I wouldn't say surprisingly, they aren't as good with those hangers as you would think. Like, you know, sometimes I think players buy all this stuff and they max out and they think that it's going to be an automatic win, but then they start losing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in our clan, we have players who have MK2 stuff, and a couple of days ago, some of them were complaining. They're like, "Man, I don't know if I want to play solo anymore because like my win percentage is like 30-something%," and I'm like, "What the heck are you running?" And then they like start posting their hangers, and I'm looking at MK2 stuff. I'm like, "Well, get some beacons or something, man. What the heck?"
Well, and you got to remember, we're talking multiple game modes now, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just even players' averages. When you look people up, people's averages are so different now because
they are.
King of the Hill.
Or
and then
free
there are
fall.
other, yeah, and then but Matt Guyver, man, Matty's average is like 800,000, and he said, "Man, all I play is free for all. It's the only thing I play, and I basically just use my Spectre the whole time." You know, I mean, it's free for all has developed a basic formula for success that isn't guaranteed, as we're saying in the chat here, kids. Skill still is needed, even in
Bob.
even in this even in this world, my friend, a world of instant gratification and shock trains. Which, by the way, the new mechanics on the shock train, if implemented, I believe will go a long way in helping balance out that weapon. I don't know if I can. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is fixing everything. But I really believe, like with the Dragoon, the shot mechanics are very important. Instant kill weapons have become somewhat the norm as far as what's being developed over the past year. Changing the shot mechanics is an excellent step towards balancing gameplay. Does it mean all your old weapons are be viable? No, they are not meant to be.
Hell no, they're not.
Certain weapons are meant to be left.
Nope.
And that is the first thing. If you really wanted to make everything old new again, you'd make them all kill around the same rate, no matter how much damage they do or whatever. The shot mechanics should be equal all the way around, and they are not. So this is a huge step going to it. It'd be easily a fun ride to see how that pans out. Boys and girls, Adrian, we have to get going here soon. We've been on and kept you plenty. But tell me, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your trip or anything we haven't touched on this evening before we let you go?
No, I think I covered everything. It's now, for me, more just waiting to see what will change based from my meeting with Pixonic. I have seen a lot of positive change in certain areas. Other areas they haven't touched on yet.
Well, I think what will be the most telling to you, Adrian, will be the things you talked with them about that they decided to do just the opposite of what you said. Not that they're going to just jump right out there and just say, "Screw Adrian." Like, if they have heard you and end up then going a different direction, that should set you off a little bit, not mad, but to at least say, what's going on here? But then again, just the opposite for if they implement stuff and listen to you exactly. either way, it's going to be an interesting ride. Adrian, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it.
To be with us and all of our listeners, because you did not have to do this. This was Adrian being a good guy and granting us an audience because he did not have to do this. We are just some goofball dudes hanging out, doing a show as a hobby. And every time I've asked Adrian to come on, he has, within a short time that he's been able, instantly done so. And I couldn't be more thankful. Thank you very much for coming on with us, Adrian.
Thank you for having me and inviting me.
Ryan,
hey,
good God.
No, I got to tell y'all something real quick. Talk about the shot mechanics, like with the new weapons, the shock train, and then the King Day. So I made a video not too long ago about the Fury King Day, or it was in the video. It wasn't the video topic. And I was mesmerized by how much damage output it did. Boom. And then that sound, I was like, oh, this is my type.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. And then they said, oh, we're going to drop it down to 6 seconds instead of the 15. So I put them on the Fury yesterday, and I was like, man, I'm strutting over to the beacon on Shenzhen, and I'm looking across, and I'm saying, I got that Spectre, because he just finished his stealth, and he was at like 1,100 or 900 meters, and I hit that button, and boom, and it went right past him. I was like, oh, hell no, maybe, okay, let me try this again. So I waited for that 6 seconds, and I looked for someone, and I found him, and he was a sitting target, and I hit that button, boom, and it went through him. I was like, oh man, so there's a damage glitch now. I did not know it got dropped down to 800, and I'm shooting at people greater than 800. That was, and I've probably fired like 11 rounds.
And I pushed that projectile went and stopped and dropped. And that was it. And the guy looking at it,
this is crazy. But I want everyone that has those shock trains to get like an electronic herpy right here. I hate that dang weapon, man. Oh man, I hope they wake up with feet that are double the size of their normal feet, or hands like evil size. You know what I'm saying? Like walking around
easy with the,
you know what I'm saying? Is it recognized?
See, Droopy's hand is just as messed up as my hand.
Oh, and I have to say real quick, y'all who like messing with me about my hat, check this out. my wife gave me duck. my wife gave me duck pajama bottoms, so I'm wearing duck pajama bottoms. So I hope that makes up for it. I ain't trying to make friends. Hey,
on the rear end is it?
It's all ducks, and then I have the duck slippers, and that's how I play, man. My feet get warm, and I was like, man, I'm gonna bust somebody up. Nah, man. Thanks, Adrian, for coming through.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anytime, guys.
Guys in the chat, thank you for coming. We've had, a good 70, 80 people for a long time tonight. We'll get this out for people to watch later. And Adrian, thank you for taking the time that you do to make all your videos and do your best to inform us, teach us, and still involve fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And then I want to thank everyone for the super chat. It really helps a lot. It means a lot to me beyond words. And I also want to say that there's a lot of people out there, and I don't know why. It just seems like it's just more and more daily, that are struggling with depression, that are struggling with suicidal thoughts, that are going through, really tough times. Lift them up, be there for them, encourage them. You never know what a positive word or a text message or whatever it is, Discord chat or whatever, it would go a long way for them, to let them know that you're there and that somebody cares. So
show us the door, Drew.
We hope that you, your friends, and family are happy, healthy, and safe. So holla. Peace, guys.
See you, pimps.
Did you say pimps?
Just for you. That was just for you.